Welcome to Disruptive Successor, a show for next generation leaders in family businesses and entrepreneurs who want to disrupt the status quo and take their existing business to a whole new level. We all know that what got us here isn't going to get us there. This show will provide inspiration, advice, and resources to help you create massive impact. This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Hi, it's Jonathan Goldhill, and welcome back to another episode of the Disruptive Successor Show. Today's show is going to be about time management. My guest is Andrew Hartman, and he is the founder of Time Boss, an organization that helps leaders and their teams reinvent their relationships with time to get more done with less stress and less anxiety. Andrew founded Time Boss after burning out several times over, even losing his sense of smell for a season. He has taken all he has learned over the years to build a system to help business leaders avoid the same mistakes and chaos. For more information, visit timeboss.us to access his limited time free masterclass, the Time Boss Weekly Operating System. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jonathan, how are you? Good. So glad to be here.
All right. So the bio says you lost your sense of smell for a season. Maybe we should start there. And that before I asked you about how did you get into this business?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So what I always like to say is I grew up in a very loving family, very supportive. I had a great college education, got into my second job, actually. First job was pretty easy. Second job, I was a project manager at an agency where I had 12 clients, all demanding my time, did not care about each other's needs, just wanted me to focus on them, was so overwhelmed, way more to do than I had time to do it. And I realized suddenly no one had ever taught me how to manage time. I had no clue how to contend with the things that were coming at me. And so I just tried to shovel as fast as I could and was grinding myself to a pulp and waking up in the middle of the night in cold sweats, just stress from all the demands of work, which I've come to find out is a fairly common experience for a lot of knowledge workers in particular, people that are responsible to handle their own schedule. And it all culminated one day I woke up and I just couldn't smell. And it stayed that way for 6 months.
Wow.
And losing your sense of smell, I love to eat, and losing your sense of smell means you do not taste food. So it was a pretty brutal wake-up call for me of something has got to be different. Something's got to be different.
Yeah. All right. So how did you get into this business? You were involved in the software industry, right? Managing teams, working with teams.
Yeah, that's right. So I moved on from the agency, wanted to go to the client side. I was a product leader and then ultimately a COO of a number of very early stage software companies. And early stage software companies, take whatever I was doing at the agency and turn it up to 11 in terms of pressure and stress, short runways, high expectations. You have to deliver. And I was finding that I just was consistently burning out. I was just going so hard, and I was driving my teams to go so hard that we just got to such a rough point. And what I realized, it was just not logical. For me, as the leader of the ops leader of these organizations, I needed to stay in the game, and I needed my team to stay in the game. So it made no sense for us to run the way we were running, where ultimately people were breaking down and I was breaking down. And I realized we had to shift the way that we led our own time, or it wasn't going to be sustainable. And so that led me on a path for my teams to find what I call our highest sustainable pace. What is the what is the optimal speed that we can run at to make the most impact possible without degrading ourselves, without stress or anxiety being what's driving the whole ship. And so I got that right in my companies, and individuals started leaning in to say, what are you guys doing? You seem to be making tremendous progress without really breaking a sweat. So I started coaching people adjacent to me, and eventually it just rolled into launching Time Boss, where I now coach individuals and teams to do exactly that. How do you make the most progress possible, getting more done with less stress, without anxiety?
So my background is having read David Allen's book, became kind of he was the productivity guru,
Right,
and his systems were really helpful. I mean, I
right.
remember reading these 15, 20 or more years ago, but what makes Time Boss different from other productivity frameworks out there?
Yeah, that is a great question. I get asked that all the time. So it's interesting. Getting things done is a really great example. Getting things done. I actually started my productivity journey with getting things done when I was
Hmm.
a stressed out project manager. Someone handed me getting things done and said, "Hey, crazy, you should probably read this." And the benefit, the primary value of getting things done is getting everything out of your head into a system, which is brilliant. And it is actually the first step that I teach anyone is you cannot manage all the things in your head at the same time. You have to be able to get them out in front of you into a system where you can see them. The challenge of that is you don't take the next step of understanding what is my actual capacity. Once I get all these things out of my head, what is my actual capacity to get things done? And so that's an example with getting things done where I think it's a great start. I don't think it's a fully cohesive system to deal with the modern knowledge worker and work environment where we can work forever. We can never stop working. All of us have backlogs and lists well beyond whatever we have the capacity for. So whether it's bullet journal or just do the three things or Pomodoro method or getting things done, they often are not complete solutions. So for me, as I was running teams, I needed a full ecosystem. I didn't need hacks. I needed an operating system that would work soup to nuts, that would contend with anything coming at my team so that when it landed on their plate, they knew what to do with it. And they knew the things that we could say yes to, and they knew the things that we could say no to, and they understood their capacity. And so Time Boss is really a cohesive set of habits to handle the modern work environment that allows someone to be intensely focused and get a lot of things done, but not be overwhelmed by the sheer number of things that are coming at them.
So let's dive a little deeper into that, including discussing what the Pomodoro method is. And let me just
Sure.
start by saying that one of what I think are the silver bullets in my coaching practice, one that I've been using since 2003, is basically it's known by most people as the Pareto principle or the 80
Yes.
20 rule. I have a tool in my tool set. I call it the vital few and trivial many.
Mm,
Others have called it delegate and elevate or love
right.
and loathe, or I've even shown it to clients as here's a fun skills matrix. I mean, these are classic two by twos, if you will, like a grid with four boxes. And one box is the one that is your zone of genius. And this is the stuff that's either high fun, high skill, high leverage, high value, whatever you want to call it. And at the opposite corner is low fun, low skill, low value, trivial many, whatever you want to call that. And
Right.
getting people to start to look at their work and putting their activities into the different boxes so they can start to gain some clarity around what are you really, really good at? What do you love doing? And you would,
Right.
do endlessly, effortlessly. Like what's in your zone of genius, your zone of excellence? And let's focus on those and kind of delegate the others. So I assume something like that, that kind of prioritization method, whatever you call it, is in your toolkit. But tell us, either expand upon that or talk to us about the Pomodoro technique. Give us a few other maybe tools or tips that you use.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think your framework is brilliant, Jonathan, and I would definitely recommend it. So what I often say is, well, the first thing people need to get clear on is how much of their life do they want to give to anything? if it's work or personal or a side hustle, it doesn't matter. They need to decide for themselves, this is how much I'm willing to commit. And the average knowledge worker is putting, somewhere between 40 and 60 hours, probably somewhere in there. If you work part-time, maybe less. Some people will do a little bit more, but it's somewhere in there. And so once you decide that, that's really your inventory. So that's what you have to spend. It's your 40 to 60 hours is like 40 to 60 bets on what's going to really get leverage on whatever outcome you're trying to drive. And so if that's the case, and that's a finite capacity, then it only is logical that you would say, what, to your point, the Pareto principle, what are the 20% of tasks that will make 80% of the difference that I want to prioritize and get to my calendar first? And so your calendar literally becomes your capacity. It becomes the way that you visualize how you're going to spend that time. And so once you isolate, what are those high leverage tasks that I'm with you on? I love doing them. I'm good at them, and they make a difference in my business. How do I get those to my calendar first and prioritize those in and run that process through, some reasonable portion of your capacity? I often recommend 60% that people would budget, time block up to 60% of their time.
I agree.
And then once you do that, what most people don't do is they don't deal with the things that don't fit. So if they block in that time, you use the language, the trivial few, they leave
Right.
the trivial few kind of hanging out there. And sometimes those trivial few, though, they may not be high leverage.
Trivial
They may
many
be,
is what I call them,
sorry,
actually, Andrew. That's
trivial
okay.
many. I apologize.
That's all right.
The trivial many, if they're not going to fit in your calendar, like if you start your weekend, there's no way I'm getting those done.
Right.
And if those create risk for you, like maybe it's a quick follow-up, or maybe it's your taxes you have to get in, or who knows what. You're like, it's not going to make the difference in my business, but if I don't do it, it's going to hurt. What most people don't do is they don't make a plan for the things that don't fit. So they become emotional anchors that they just carry all week long, and they cloud their ability to truly focus. And so what I recommend people do is really get clear on your capacity, time block your time, deal with the things that don't fit. And then when you show up to do the things that actually ended up on your calendar, you can be fully present to them and just do one thing at a time. And that's where, something like the Pomodoro method, which is just a method of focus, people will vary on how much time they do it for, but often it's a 20 to 25-minute block where you don't do anything else besides a single task in front of you.
Right.
And at the end of those 25 minutes, you could take a 5-minute break and do whatever you want. But it's a method of focus and then relax, focus and then relax. And it's actually a great method, but it works in the context of an ecosystem. So for me, if I did the work to plan out my week, and I isolate my highest leverage task that I'm going to do 8 a.m. on Monday, first thing, Pomodoro becomes a technique to protect that 8 a.m. task. Pomodoro is not a strategy in and of itself. It's a tactic to help me within a time operating ecosystem to be very, very focused over the course of that hour. So that's how that might fit into the way I think about time.
Yeah, that's how I wrote my book. I set 50 or 55, I forget, minute timers.
Yeah.
And I tried to write each chapter in 55 minutes. And then I would get up and take a 5 or 10-minute break. And then I would do 2 or 3 of those in a day. And the goal was to write the whole book in 14 days, which was challenging. And I thought I accomplished it, but then the book sat for 6 weeks. And then I sent it to my publisher, and I had boasted about how I wrote it in 14 days. And his comment was, "Yeah, I could tell." So that wasn't too good. But these types of techniques are so important. Stephen Covey, I think, was one of the first people I know to apply the 80-20 principle to business and to life, and prioritizing what he called rocks. The rocks, obviously, are those big things that you want to get done in a week or a month or a quarter. And because your calendar will easily fill up with what he called the pebbles and the sand. And then for comic relief, he'd usually do a video where he'd actually pour water or a can of beer. And see, you could still get some of that in there too. But most people don't plan around the big stuff. And that's the biggest problem. It's not about time management, as I think you probably agree. It's about priority management.
Correct. Yeah.
And figuring out what really is going to move the business or improve your life over the next block next, and we usually think in terms of 13-week races.
Right.
And so you can break down each week. So that's a quarter, 13 weeks. And you can break down each week by some measurable activity to see if you're making progress.
Yep, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah, it's the way that I often describe it is it's just currency.
Right.
We all feel comfortable with the idea of monetary currency, that if I was going to make investments, I have $10,000 and I want to invest it to get the greatest return. We all understand that concept. We're not going to go buy McDonald's cheeseburgers with $10,000 and expect to get some type of outcome. But with our time, we don't naturally think that way. And it's the same. If I, again, let's say as a knowledge worker, I choose that I'm going to work 50 hours next week. That is 50 hours of currency that I have to bet on the things that are going to ultimately drive whatever I care about forward. And to your point with a rock, it's 50 hours that I need to take some reasonable portion of that currency and bet against that rock. And if I do that, how do I ensure that I protect that time? And I'm isolating myself from distraction, and I'm making sure that there's room for the other little pebbles that do need to work through just to keep the business going. But I'm also making sure there's priority for that time. It just takes some work. It just takes, it's not hard. I always tell people it's not rocket science. It's just a different set of habits than they probably were taught. And they have to learn those habits. But once they learn the habits, they can, like James Clear talks about, we don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. And obviously you could transpose systems and habits in his world.
Mm-hmm.
So I really believe in habits related to time. When there are more things to do and I know then I have time to do it, I'm going to fall back into my habits. When I have these large rocks that I know I need to make happen and I need to figure out how to get that to my calendar over the next 7 days, I'm going to fall back into my habits. I'm not going to white knuckle my way through and do my best just to get these done. I know what to do when these things hit me because I have good habits related to time. And that's what I try to teach people in teams. So they're very resilient, regardless of what they're focused on.
I think that people who understand this are all in on it.
Yeah.
People who don't understand it are all against it. And that latter group of people, they're addicted to the anxiety that is so easy to ride the wave of in our world. Because, I mean, first of all, think about all the different ways that people are communicating with you these days.
Right.
Right. Some people in my world communicate to me through WhatsApp, some through Facebook Messenger, some through text, some through phone call, some through email. There are just so many methods.
Right.
And then, as I'm driving maybe down the freeway or in the world, there's advertising messages, there's radio messages, there's so much going on that, it's no wonder that we can be addicted to just cycling through life and just trying to swing at, at what's coming at our way without trying to take time to slow down and map out what's most important to us.
Yeah.
I imagine your system is a system to try and put all that stuff in check, to eliminate some of the multitasking, multi-activity approach that we take to life.
Right. Yeah, it absolutely is. I don't think that people recognize the impact that multitasking is having on them. And probably because they don't have a good A/B test to compare it to. They've never run a week where they didn't multitask like that. But
Right.
the research would say, I mean, the research is fascinating on this. The research would say that aggressive multitasking can cost you as much as 40% of your productive day. The analogies they use is it's akin to missing a night of sleep or literally smoking a joint. So imagine if you just missed a night of sleep and then you woke up and tried to be effective. I mean, it's fully illogical. You never do that. But yet the research shows that when we multitask, what we're doing is every time we switch context, we are booting up that context in our brain. And the way that our brain works, it's a chemical system. So every time we switch context, we don't perfectly flush whatever that last context was. It's still there. So as we switch and switch and switch and switch and switch, we're literally tiring out our brain, flooding it with context that we can't easily flush, which ultimately robs us of our ability to be focused and really, really effective. And so, yeah, you're right. we often classically think of multitasking like I'm working on this task and now I'm working on this task. But multitasking can be anything. It's anytime our brain oscillates across a different subject. So, I mean, it can be if I'm working from home and my house is really dirty, and every time I look to the right, I feel impacted by the fact that my house is dirty. I'm actually multitasking. I'm trying to deal with a bunch of problems at the same time that are drawing me from the present moment. And again, this claim or the encouragement I would make to anyone that feels like they are a multitasker and they can do that is I would just encourage them to experiment for 7 days not doing it and just and see the difference between the two. And if they choose to go back, great. But my strongly held belief is if someone can get over the hump on focus and be fully present to a single task, complete it, move on to the next one, be fully present to that task, complete it, whether it's your work or spending time with your kids or spending time with your spouse or whatever, there is such a difference in the experience of life when we can be fully present to just one thing at a time. I think that's what we all want. I think deep down, we all want to be third graders again, lost in the moment of whatever we're focused on and just doing that one thing. And the world is just coming at us, trying to distract us constantly and pulling us in different directions that prevent us from doing that.
I couldn't agree with you more, but I'm going to take some stance that's a little bit different and maybe challenging.
Please do.
Because these are not usually my clients, but people who are so ADHD that they can't follow one course until successful, which, by the way, is an acronym. Follow one course until successful is an acronym for, or focus is the acronym for follow one course until successful. They can't because their brain is addicted to keeping so many balls up in the air. And they believe, I believe these people believe this is the way. This is their version of stoicism, I guess. And they think that they have a superpower that can keep all these balls in the air. And that's how they experience life. And that's what was exciting to them as a third grader was look at how I can manage all these friendships and school activities and so I believe, and there were words you said that they would have a different experience of life. They would experience a sense of inner calm and inner peace.
Yeah.
But that is so anathema to these individuals that they live for that adrenaline, that a dopamine hit of like, just keep like throwing or having balls come at you and keep them in the air, keep the plate spinning. I think these people, I don't know them all that well. I am thinking of a particular individual that I do know quite well, but these people don't become clients of Time Boss or Goldhill Group coaching because they're constantly spinning plates.
Yeah.
They don't take the time to develop these atomic habits, to quote James Clear.
They don't take the time, no pun intended.
Right.
Yeah, it's the first question that I ask someone is, what do you want? And it really comes down to if there's a gap. If someone, like the individual you're referencing, if they're not getting the life that they want, then I think you unpack that. If they're happy with what they have and they're happy with their outcomes and they're happy with where they are in life, then there is no gap, then there's nothing to solve. But for the people that, even someone with ADHD that looks at this and says, I am precluded from the life I want because of how I am approaching time,
Right.
then to that individual, I would say, hey, there's a path. And I really look at truly being the boss of our time. That's where the language time boss comes from. We're the boss of our future self. I look at it like a muscle to build. All of us have lived into our habits related to time over decades. And so it's just a matter of changing those habits, but we have to live our way out of the habits we lived our way into. We have to learn to live a new set of habits. And so it doesn't mean that next week I'm going to be perfect, but I do think next week it means that I can flex that muscle a little bit harder. So if someone does have a challenge focusing, let's not do an hour at a time. Let's look at 15 minutes at a time. And that's where Pomodoro can be very, very effective.
Right.
You can ladder your way up to a new habit, but But again, it comes down to that, Jonathan, for me, my strongly held belief, if someone doesn't feel a gap, they're never going to change. They have to feel pain from their current approach or they're not going to do it differently. And so I just always start with that question. And if they're ready to change, I'm certainly ready to connect with them.
That makes sense. I mean, some people have to hit bottom, and that
Yes.
would be, and you experienced that, right? You
Right.
experienced burnout, and you said, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a different way.
Right.
And I know one of the things I talked about in my book it was a chapter on time management. And I said it's really about energy management first, which is you have to do the things that are going to give you the energy that you need to be the most productive possible. And that energy looks like, for a lot of people, it's about getting enough sleep,
Right.
the right amount of sleep, getting some exercise, eating well, eating nutritiously so that it's not sapping you of energy, but
Right.
giving you fuel. Um, there are a number of things that you need to do. I mean, I think pay attention to your emotional state so you can manage that, because it's all about regulating your behaviors, whether it's emotional or physical or health, or the behaviors that are going to give you the superpower to manage super actions, which is what great time management is going to allow you to be more productive.
Yeah.
But these are difficult. Like burnout is something that too many people don't see it coming, don't recognize, and they shoot the mark like
Right.
an addict, and they don't realize, because they're so addicted to the
Yeah.
workaholism.
Yeah. Yeah. A quick heuristic I use to help people think about that is if you live today 1,000 times over again, what do you think your life would look like? Because people often think I can just get past today, or I can just get past this week or this project or whatever. They're very blinders. They're very focused on the present self. And they don't spend a lot of time thinking about what is the long-term impact on my future self, who I will eventually live into. And that idea of today times 1,000 often can be a real break. Like, oh my goodness, if I relive this day 1,000 times over, I would burn out. I I can't do this. Like I can't in my day as stressed as I am. I can't in my day with this many things undone on my to-do list, or this low of energy, or this amount of anxiety, whatever it is. So I think you just got to give people that, again, it's that compelling moment. It's that framework that says this is not working. I am not on a good path. James Clear talks about 1 degree course corrections, and he said they work in both directions. So a 1 degree positive course correction can mean liftoff. A 1 degree negative course correction or a lack of course correction can drive you into the ground over time. And so I think you have to have that perspective when you think about it. But I think what you shared in your book about managing energy is exactly right. If I show up at 8 a.m. and I've time blocked to do this task, I, I need to be ready. Like the decisions I make, the breakfast I have, did I wake up and work out? Did I get good sleep the night before? All those things become really important to set me up to be successful. And that's what I think what really good time management, even the language Time Boss, is about, is how do I set up my future self to be successful? How do I set up my future self to do their best work? At lunch, if I go to Chipotle and I have 2 burritos, my 3 p.m. self is not going to be in a great position to make good work happen. And so being thoughtful always of how am I setting up my future self to really have the life that they want? I think it comes down to the decisions we make today.
Great. Do you have any quick or short tips on how people find work-life balance when um, you probably know, I think there's some legislation maybe pending in the state of California about owners of businesses not being able to text, or they can text maybe employees after 5 o'clock or after work hours, but employees don't have to respond until it's the workday. And
Right.
that's kind of, from the outside, like government regulation, you'd think that there are just other or better ways. But what are some of the things that you recommend? Because our work now follows us everywhere we go, and it competes with our family, it competes with our friends for attention. It makes it harder than ever to unplug and be intentionally present in one space.
Yeah.
What are some of your hot tips?
Yeah, I think one I said earlier, I think we just have to decide how much of our life we're willing to give to work. So there's a lie we believe that we just need to be constantly available. And I think that, to your point, degrades every other area of our life. And so for me, I've just decided I'm willing to give 50 hours to income generating activities and that's it. And sometimes I'll do more. If we have a project or thing we're pushing for, I can definitely sprint. But on the default, I want to give about 50 hours, which means my day ends every day between 5:30 and 6. That's when I try to close down. And so first move is to decide how much you're going to work. Second move, I think, is really critical is to have a really good daily close down activity. Cal Newport in his book Deep Work talked about this, and I've incorporated it into Time Boss, this idea of a daily review where you're literally closing the loops. So what most people do, that the average experience is you work, and you work past whatever deadline you wanted to stop working, and then you slam your laptop shut and you just try to be separate from work. And the reality is your emotions are just raging, right? All the chemical activity all that context you had booted up is still with you as you go to dinner, as you spend time with your kids, whatever. And so I think you need a really good end of your day ritual to close those loops, put everything away, put it back into the system, have a system that you trust so that when you shut your laptop, you can be emotionally free. That's actually the number one thing that people talk about in Time Boss. It's this, didn't expect it, but you'll see it in testimonial after testimonial. I shut my laptop at the end of the day and I feel fully free to be with my family. That is what people want. They want to do good work. They want to contribute, but they also want to care for their families and be in their communities and all those things. So I think a daily close down is really important. And the third thing, you heard me share it a bit on the front end, I am a firm believer in scheduling buffer into your calendar. Most people pack themselves to the brim, and then their calendar cannot deal with the chaos of the reality of the world. Things are going to break. Clients are going to call. Your kids are going to need you. The water heater is going to go out, whatever. Like stuff's going to interrupt your day. So I think if you have a solid buffer that can deal, I call it the whirlwind, that can deal with the whirlwind of life with emails and phone calls and kids and water heaters and all the things, then I think that combination of things, deciding how much you're going to work, have a good close down, and have a buffer to deal with reality, I think you can typically be really successful. And then the last thing that you mentioned it, I think sometimes you just have to have boundaries where you need to retrain the relationships in your life to say, hey, after 6 p.m., if you need me, if it is on fire, please call me. I will pick up. But otherwise, I will get back to you tomorrow morning. And what you're saying is you're providing empathy to that individual that I care about your needs. I realize that priorities can come up that might matter after hours. And if that does, I'm available. Call me. I don't want this ship to burn down. But otherwise, let's handle it in the morning. And so again, you're providing empathy to that individual. You're providing them confidence that their need will be met, but you're differentiating between requests. You're having a lane for the fires, the true fires, and you're having a lane for standard communication that's just going to wait until tomorrow, and then I'll get back to you. And so I think those type of things can really help people, again, create some separation where they can have the life they want outside of work, and they can be fully present to do phenomenal, great work when they're at work.
Andrew, thank you so much for being on the show and for sharing your words of wisdom. So Andrew Hartman is founder of Time Boss, based in Irvine, California. Go to timeboss.us to access his limited time free masterclass, the Time Boss Weekly Operating System. Andrew, thanks again for being on the show. And folks, you know the drill, right? If you got some good value, tell others about this. Check out our guests' websites and stay tuned for future episodes of the Disruptive Successor Show.
This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Thank you for joining us on the Disruptive Successor podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, review, and share with a friend who would benefit from the message. If you're interested in picking up a copy of my book, Disruptive Successor, go to disruptivesuccessor.com.